All right, good morning, everyone. As I said again, it's a pleasure to have all of you on board. And we'd like to start the session, and I will start us off with a prayer. So let us believe and pray. And then from there, I will welcome my director to welcome you officially. So let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you this morning. Thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for this opportunity to meet, to come and learn. We thank you for our moderator of the day. We pray that you will give her wisdom and that, dear Lord, we will be able to gain a lot from this session. We pray this, trusting and believing. Amen. Director, karibu sana. Say hi to us and then we can start off the session. You're muted, Director.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for logging in. In the IIK family, we are always excited to host you. I'm excited this morning to see 61 people have logged in order to be able to partner together with IIK in this very, very important topic that we are holding today. Indeed, in the world all over, mental health issues is a topic that is on top of every organization because it is real, it is happening, and we have to deal with it. Gone are the days when you mentioned the word mentor and people looked at you like you are not supposed to be here, you're supposed to be in a confined facility. Now it is real with everyone, with us, with whatever is happening in our environment, in our homes, in our offices. And when we talk about it, the more we talk about it, it's part of therapy. The more we talk about it, the more we become aware of how we are supposed to behave in our offices, in our homes, as professionals, and the kind of people that you meet, how you relate with them. So today we are here to learn, we are here to be educated, we are here to talk to each other, we are here to share experiences this morning. And I want to welcome each one of you that feel free to chat on the open chat as the speaker is speaking to us. Raise your hand in case there is any clarity of any issue that you need clarified. And let us all run, let us all be enlightened, and let us struggle or let us train to be better professionals than what we are today. For you do not know the client you are meeting next, you do not know the customer who will be coming to your desk the next minute and what kind of issues that one is struggling with. But from today, we will be able to handle our homes, we will be able to handle our environment, we will be able to handle our bosses, we will be able to handle our juniors, because we will be better people and enlightened people. So without much ado, let me welcome everyone that we share the insights, but please feel free to chat on the chat box as the speaker is speaking. Feel free to raise your hand, feel free to write back to us, and at the end of this session, the Institute will make sure that the recordings are sent over to you so that anytime you need to refresh, you can have a recording of it. So without much ado, let me declare the webinar officially opened and welcome everyone. And thank you for logging in. But I cannot leave without reminding each one of us as professionals that our conference for October is coming up in the month of October. As usual, that is our showstopper, our annual conference. This year, it's bigger, it's better, and we are going to be at Sarova Whitesides in Mombasa on the 11th, 12th, and 13th of October. So please, if you haven't seen your email, reach out to Secretariat. If your boss has seen the email and is not looking at it, please ensure that he looks at it, and let us all get sponsorship. Let us all get sponsored to that conference, and together we shall make IIK great. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Director. All right, so we'll move straight on. I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today. Her name is Victoria Rika. She's the head of corporate mental health and wellness programs at Chiromo Hospital Group. She has vast experience working as a clinical and counseling psychologist. Victoria is a core resource in the implementation of EAPs for organizations. With her expertise, she also volunteers as a peer and youth counselor. She has been a frontline psychotherapist amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, helping hundreds of those who are affected. Victoria has a master's degree in counseling, psychology, and an advanced diploma in mental health practice from Amref International University. So at this opportunity, I'd like to invite Miss Victoria. Please come and take it away. Thank you very much, and everyone enjoy.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Madam Director. Kindly allow me to share the slides, and then we can proceed. Kindly all mute.
Yes, they are.
Are the slides moving, Mary?
Yes, they are. We are good.
Am I audible? Anyone?
Yes,
we
you
can
are
hear
audible.
you. And we could see your slides.
Can you hear me? Gideon, Mary?
Yes, we can hear you and we could see your slides.
Hello, am I audible?
Hey.
Hello, Victoria, we could hear you.
Okay, all right. I see. Yes, I am audible. So let us proceed. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about self-care. Like Mary did mention, I'm from Chiromo Hospital Group. I'm a clinical psychologist by profession. And basically what we do is purely mental health. So for those who may not know Chiromo Hospital Group, that's our hospital. We have about 6 branches, 5 of them both inpatient, outpatient facilities. We have 1 outpatient clinic at Upper Hill Medical Center. So what we aspire to do is purely to provide dignified quality mental health care in Africa. That's our vision. And in terms of our mission, we aspire to pursue excellence in the delivery of mental health services by adhering to evidence-based practices. So we use what is tried and tested. Our core values are those ones written there: respect, honesty, innovation, and reliability. And working in the space where mental health is full of so much stigma, then we want our patients or our clients to recover in dignity. So before we talk about self-care, we need to understand what mental health is all about. And according to the World Health Organization, when we talk about mental health, we are saying it is that state of well-being in which every individual, number one, is able to realize their own potential. And when we talk about realizing their own potential, this could be in reference, for example, when you are in primary or high school and you receive your card, your report card. And the teacher would have said that, Victoria, you're scoring 60% in English, yet you have the potential or the ability or capacity to score 80%. So if you as an individual are not realizing your full potential as an individual at your workplace, at home, wherever you are in the community, then would say that you're already experiencing poor mental health. Are you able to cope with normal life stresses? And normal life stresses could be things like traffic jam. Maybe you are scheduled for a meeting at some point, you're stuck in traffic jam, and by the time you get to the meeting, you're so late, but you're not able to handle your emotions, and you start projecting your anger, your irritability at your colleagues. So if you're not able to cope with normal life stresses, there could also be things like relationship issues, then we say that your mental health is not in a good place. At the end of the day, can you say that you've been productive, you've been fruitful at the workplace? Can you say that you've met your targets for the day or for the week? If you cannot say that, then again, we say that your mental health is compromised. And are you able to make a contribution to the community? If you're not at work today, if you're not in church, if you're not in your usual then will people notice that there's a difference because something has gone undone simply because Victoria was not there? So if you realize now from this definition, you do not have to have poor mental health by being on the streets collecting papers or running around naked. But if you're not able to meet this definition, then we say that you have poor mental health. The statistics when it comes to mental health illnesses are very high. And World Health Organization again says that 1 in every 4 is experiencing or will experience a mental health illness at some point in their life. So if you look around you, if you're in the space of 4 people seated, then one of us is experiencing poor mental health. So we do, of course, then have mental illnesses or mental disorders. And for us to define that, mental illnesses or disorders are a range of conditions which negatively will affect your mood, how you're feeling, how you're thinking, and also how you are behaving. And we will wrap it up and see why is it important for me to maintain self-care when it comes to mental health issues. Now, of course, there are risk factors and triggers towards mental illnesses. Just like, for example, you do have physical illnesses. For example, you get malaria, and then the doctor will ask you, had you visited Kisumu? Were you in some tropical area? So if you are in a tropical area, then you have a risk, that's a risk factor for something like malaria. The same way, we have risk factors for mental illnesses. And number one, we say genetical component. If, for example, you had a parent who had depression, then you as an offspring, you have what we call a predisposition or a likelihood of getting depressed if you're not able to manage the stressors around your environment due to the genetical component. Now, we're not saying that if your mom had depression or your parent had depression, then absolutely you must get it. We're just saying that as opposed to someone else who has got no depression in the family history, you stand a higher risk of falling into depression if you're not able to manage your stressors because of the genetical loading. Then we talk about environment, the things that are happening around you, right? You could be experiencing something like loss and grief. And loss and grief is not just about losing somebody to death. It could also be losing your job. It could also be losing a relationship. It could also be losing something as you know, not as significant, something like a phone. Some of us, when we lose our phones, we are barely able to function until we go back and buy a new phone, get a new SIM card. So that could also cause you to be in a place where you develop anxiety because you're wondering who has called me, what calls have I missed out, what information am I missing out. So your environment would also predispose you towards having poor mental health. Adverse childhood experiences, these are the things that you experience growing up. Adverse childhood experiences could be things like traumatic experiences. Maybe you grew up in a home where you had alcoholic parents, so you were not well taken care of as a child. You may have grown up in an environment where you're physically, sexually, emotionally abused. You may also have grown up with absentee parents, or grown up with a condition that exposed you to an adversity. So growing up, if you're not able to process the things that happened to you in childhood, then you could easily get into a place where you experience poor mental health. And of course, if you're experiencing physical health conditions, things like cancer, other chronic illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, things that require you to always be on the lookout for your medical health, then you could get into a place where you experience poor mental health. Then we talk about lifestyle factors. How much alcohol are you consuming? What drugs, what substances are you taking? And when we talk about alcohol, sometimes you will say, yes, I am a social drinker, but you can't be a social drinker who slowly moves on into addiction, such that you're not able to cope unless you take alcohol. So you cannot come to the workplace unless you first of all take something in the morning to help stabilize you. You're not able to have proper thinking or proper functioning unless you take alcohol. Then we say that you become addicted. And of course, if you're taking things like marijuana, especially for the younger population, then it will also cause you to get into a place where you may get mental illnesses. Remember, there are mental illnesses which will come about as a result of genetical components, but there are those that you will bring about to yourself as a result of your lifestyle. How much sleep are you getting? We say at least between 7 to 8 hours is good. And what are you eating? Are you the kind of person who's always binging on junk food, or are you eating good, nutritious food? When it comes to brain chemistry, and we will see the relationship, when we all have neurotransmitters, which are the chemical messengers within the brain. If for whatever reason you have low levels, then that could also be a contributor towards mental illnesses. And we look at it when we look at stress and how it impacts on your brain chemistry. Now, quickly, we can look at types of mental illnesses, and we could have things like, for example, depression. You could also have things like anxiety disorders, schizophrenia. When it comes to depression and anxiety, these are the most prevalent amongst the working population. So you'll find someone is experiencing low mood, someone is experiencing lack of motivation, but they come to the office and they're expected to be productive. Remember, we've said if you are experiencing poor mental health, then you become dysfunctional. You're not productive at the work environment. And sometimes the depression can be really stretched out to the point of you becoming suicidal. So you start thinking, if I kill myself, if I check out, then no one is going to care. There'll be no one is going to miss me. No one is going to miss my input to this particular organization or to this particular family. So if you experience those symptoms, feeling very low, feeling very sad, sometimes crying for no reason, for up to about 2 weeks, then we would diagnose you with depression. Remember, we are saying that depression and anxiety disorders are the most common amongst the working population. We all have an element of anxiety, because it helps us function. If you're given a project and you're told you need to deliver and deliver well, you'll be a little bit anxious about how will I do it. But if you become so anxious to the point of it making you dysfunctional, then we say you have an anxiety disorder. So maybe you're told you need to present in front of your colleague, you start becoming sweaty, you're shaking, you're having heart palpitations, suddenly you want to visit the bathroom, then we say you're experiencing anxiety. Then we have what is one of the most severe forms of mental illnesses, if not the most severe, called schizophrenia. Now, with schizophrenia, this is what we call a psychotic illness, where you're completely out of touch with reality. You're hearing voices, you're seeing images which other people are not hearing or seeing. You could even be smelling smells which other people are not smelling, or feeling things crawling on your skin. And when other people look at your skin, there's absolutely nothing crawling on your skin, yet in your reality, you are experiencing it. Now, if you have these symptoms for a period less than 6 months, we will not say you're experiencing schizophrenia. We will say you're having a psychotic illness. But if you have the same symptoms continually for 6 months and above, then we will say that you're experiencing schizophrenia. Now, this is where you see people out on the streets running around, talking to themselves. We can dispense medication and also offer therapy for people who are experiencing schizophrenia, but this is a lifelong illness and usually just manageable through medication and therapy. Now, alcohol use disorder has officially been classified as a mental illness, a brain disorder. So if you're not able to function unless you take alcohol, then you need to take a closer look at whether you could be experiencing a mental illness. Then we do have what we call personality disorders. We all have our own different personalities, and our personalities could be because of temperament, environment, where we grew up, and these will shape you to having a certain kind of personality, so to speak. So we have people who are on the extreme end of different personalities. For example, someone who may have what we call narcissistic personality disorders. So this could be your boss, but they never see your point of view. It's always about them. They always have to have the last word. People who have narcissistic personality disorder do not even know that they have a disorder, or do not admit. It's always not their fault, it's always someone else's fault. So it becomes very difficult to deal with people who have that kind of a personality disorder, because for me to be able to help you, then you must have insight that yes, you do have a problem. Then we have what we call eating disorders, and sometimes you'll find these mainly amongst the young girls. We have what we call anorexia nervosa, where they will fail to eat, they will refuse to eat, despite when they look into the mirror, they are very skinny, but they still see themselves as very obese. So it's usually about body image as a result of peer pressure, social media influence, and they feel that they're very obese. And when you look at them, they're a good weight, but they starve themselves to the point of it becoming a medical emergency. So we do have also what we call bulimia nervosa. Again, the young girls, they will eat and then induce vomiting, just to keep a certain weight, because their peers or social media has said that is what is considered beautiful. So it's important for those of us who have, young teenagers, girls, or young sisters or friends, always consider how we speak to them in terms of their body image. Then we do have what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And this happens after you have experienced or witnessed something traumatic. It does not necessarily have to happen to you, but you could watch someone else experiencing it. Maybe someone died in a road accident, or for those who experienced the bomb blast, you could have been in it, and then you start experiencing the whole event again through nightmares, through being very hypervigilant. You don't want to take risks anymore, and that could be a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. So now, just before we get into self-care, it's important to understand that stress itself does not cause you to have mental illnesses. Don't say that I am so stressed until I've become mentally unwell. It is how you handle your stressors, and these are a big bearing on self-care, that will enable you keep your mental stability, that will keep you away from getting mentally unwell, even if you have genetical loading or even if your environment is very stressful. So what happens is that when you're stressed, your system will release the stress hormone to take care of the stressor for that period of time. But now, if you have chronic stress which is not ending, then your immune system becomes activated for over a long period of time. And this is now where the issue of brain chemistry comes in, because now it affects how your brain works. So remember, stress in itself does not cause you to get into a place where you're mentally unwell. It is how you handle the stressors around your environment that will determine how well you manage it and stay away from getting mentally unstable. So this is how stress now affects your body, your mind, your emotions, and your behavior. You will find that you're so stressed, you're having frequent headaches, you're having frequent infections. Why? Because when you're stressed, your immune system goes down. So you have frequent infections, you're always sniffling, always having colds. You may find yourself having very strained muscles. Sometimes you may find yourself having skin irritations, breakouts on your skin. So you visit the dermatologist for a cream, they give you a cream, it does not help, and you have never-ending skin breakouts. Not because there's anything wrong with you, it is simply because of your level of stress. You may find when it comes to emotional level, you have a lot of depression, you have a lot of irritability, you find yourself getting angry very fast simply because you're stressed. When it comes to your mind, you have impaired judgment. You may find yourself becoming very indecisive. You may find yourself having a very negative mindset simply because you have a lot of stress. And when it comes to how you're behaving, you may find yourself trying to cope by using poor coping mechanisms such as smoking or drinking. And you may also find yourself, if you're sexually active, having very low libido. You may also lose appetite, and you may find yourself having more accidents at the workplace. Maybe, falling over your desk, pouring water on your laptop, maybe causing road accidents on the way. Why? Because when you're stressed, your mind, your cognitive functioning becomes very impaired. You may also find yourself having concentration problems and also poor memory. So then in comes the issue of self-care. So what is self-care? So we've said that mental health is that state of well-being where you're able to cope with normal stresses of life, you're able to be productive, you're able to make a contribution to the community. So if you do not do self-care, and we will define what self-care is, then you are at a risk of poor mental health, which could lead you to getting into a place where you're mentally unwell, and you start experiencing things like depression, anxiety, and the like. So self-care is taking an active and proactive role in one's own overall health and wellness. So you realize it is called self-care because no one else is going to do it for you. No one is going to tell you, unless you're a child, eat a nutritious diet, do some physical exercises, take some time with your friends, take some time out from your work environment. So it is called self-care because you as an individual are the one who is responsible for facilitating this self-care. So we are saying that it is also a framework for managing stress. Remember, we've said that unmanaged stress is what will get you into a place where you're mentally unwell. Life challenges, professional burnout, and also compassion fatigue for those who may be working in a place where you have a lot of compassion fatigue. And then also an empowerment process which creates balance and equilibrium across your personal, social, and work lives. And it is also any activity that we do, underline the word deliberately, in order to take care of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being. So when it comes to self-care, you must be deliberate, you must be intentional. So what are the benefits really of self-care? And we will look at, what self-care entails. So if you have a daily regimen of self-care, then it helps you be your best at work, in your relationships, in life. It also helps you maximize your potential. Remember, we are saying your ability, your capacity to do something will also maintain good mental health. It also improves your quality of life. If you're doing a daily regimen of self-care, then it means you're taking care of yourself. So your quality of life improves because you're able to relate better with other people, you're able to understand them better, you have clarity of mind, you have focus, you have vision, you have goals. It also enhances your physical, your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and it also helps you build resources to deal with the stressors which come about as a result of life and work. And of course, if you're doing proper self-care, it will help you sustain long-term recovery in case of any eventuality where your health is compromised, and also wellness. And wellness here is that active pursuit of maintaining proper mental health. So there are a few challenges to self-care, and this may also relate to patterns because already there's a way that you deal with the issues that surround your environment or surround your life. So patterns that you need to be aware of are things like being a workaholic. So at all costs, I need to do work. So I even take work home. I take work over the weekends. I take work even when I go on leave. So if you're a workaholic, then that presents a major challenge towards self-care. Already, the stress that you may be experiencing, if you're not able to cope with it, then it could also challenge your self-care. If you have this regimen, this is what I do for my self-care, but I'm so stressed. If I'm not cognizant of the fact that the stress can actually make me not take care of myself, then that becomes a challenge. Then also burnout. You know, burnout is where you're so stressed up to the point where you really don't care about your output anymore. At work, at home, you couldn't care less. You don't care if your director or your CEO is asking for some reports. You're so burnt out, you simply have no regard even for authority. So if you're experiencing a lot of burnout, remember that could compromise your regimen of self-care. Then also, if you're not able to set boundaries, right? Because for you to have proper self-care routine, then you must be able to set boundaries. And we say that if you have healthy boundaries, you're able to know when to say no and when to say yes to a specific task. Remember, of course, if you're talking to your supervisor, to your line manager, to your boss, then there's the way that you say no to a task in a way that communicates still a lot of respect. If you're someone who is into people pleasing, you always want to say yes to your bosses, yes to your colleagues, then you could have a real challenge when it comes to self-care, because self-care really calls for you to draw up boundaries. So if by nature you're a people pleaser, and if you look at it, someone who is a people pleaser could be having issues of very low self-esteem, then you need to check, excuse me, where that is coming from, so that you're able to work on it and rise above pleasing people, so that you're able to take care of yourself. If you are someone who is into being a perfectionist, it means then that you're not able to delegate your work, right? You cannot delegate to the people below you. You cannot delegate to your colleagues because you believe unless you do it personally, then it cannot be done well. So if you're someone who is into perfectionism, then you could have a lot of challenges when it comes to self-care. Because if you must be the one to do something, it means then that you never have time to take care of yourself or to create activities to take care of yourself. You could also be experiencing life changes and transitions. You could be a new mother, you could be a new father. You could also be in a different place in your career, and you may be focusing more on achieving than on self-care. And you'll realize that that could be detrimental to your overall well-being. So how do you practice self-care? And we are saying there that self-care is not selfish. We have 6 types of self-care, and we will look at each of them. So we have, for example, number 1, we have physical self-care. Then we have emotional self-care. We have practical self-care. We have spiritual, social, and intellectual self-care, and we will look at each of them. When it comes to physical self-care, these are activities that you do which improve the well-being of your physical health. We know that many times we are told, don't sit for too long at your desk. Why? Because you could develop things like thrombosis, you could develop cardiovascular diseases. So we are usually told that don't sit at your desk for too long, but after working for so long on the laptop, stand up, take a walk around, the office, even if it's the dispenser or to the kitchenette, just stand and take a bit of a walk to help the blood flow around your system. So taking a walk during lunch breaks, sleeping 7 to 8 hours a day, staying hydrated, eating healthy foods, Enjoying quality sleep is very important, and also scheduling well visits. We know that, for example, we have the well woman clinic and the well man clinic, where, for example, the women will have the checkup on the breasts for any signs of breast cancer. Men will do the PCSA test for a check on cancer, on cancer, prostate cancer. So if you schedule well visits, then you're someone who's been very visionary in terms of maintaining your physical self-care. Then, of course, take a walk, go out in the sunshine. It will also help boost your immunity. So physical self-care, what works for one person may not work for the other. Maybe my personal self-care, I go to the gym or I take a walk in Karura every Saturday or every 2 days. That may not work for someone else. So it is a very personal thing, which is where we are saying that self-care is down to the individual. What do you want when it comes to your physical self-care? Then we have emotional self-care. Emotional self-care is very, very important because this is how you define people who have good emotional intelligence versus people who do not have it. And these are activities that help you connect, process, and reflect on a full range of emotions. If you're in touch with the emotional side, then it means you're also able to read and understand the emotions of other people. So, how do I get in touch with my emotional side? You could, for example, see a therapist or a psychologist. You could feel that maybe you have so much anger around yourself, and maybe it is because of issues which you grew up with. You may have grown up in an environment which has shaped you. Of course, it shapes you to be the person that you are. But we say once you learn the reason why you behave the way you behave, then you do not get stuck on that, but you do something about it. You cannot forever think that I grew up in an environment where my parents were not present, therefore I am the way I am because of that. What are you doing about it? If you realize that you're someone who gets very sad and you cry over things that you're not been able to resolve, then maybe seeing a therapist would help you process those emotions. Remember, anger, anxiety, depression, those are emotions that we all experience as human beings, but what do you do with them? So emotional self-care is being able to understand that it's okay to feel an emotion, it's okay to feel anger, but how do I process it? So see a therapist, write in a journal. For some of us, it works writing in a journal. Some of us, it works creating some art pieces or playing music. That will help. And also things like just laughing it out. Sometimes you could be experiencing emotions which are not really valid or not justified, but sometimes you could actually laugh at yourself and allow yourself to find the humorous bit about it. And also, if you're holding grudges against people for things long done to you, maybe a sibling who did one thing to you, parent who did not do what you wanted them to do to you and were parenting you, sometimes they did not know any better. So practice forgiveness. Then we talk about practical self-care. Practical self-care comes in very importantly because these are tasks that you complete which fulfill core aspects of your life in order to prevent future stressful situations. Let's look at a small one, which is, for example, a budget. So some of us receive our salaries, you dispense with the rent or the mortgage or whatever it is that you're doing, and then you have no plan for what else you need to do. It's important to have a budget such that you know that at the end of the month, these are my liabilities and this is what I am investing. This is my emergency fund. This is what I'm giving to the parents. This is what I'm paying in terms of school fees. So it's important because once you do that, then you're able to see, is it enough or where am I going wrong? Where am I overspending? Where am I doing impulse buying? So if you create a budget, then you're able to plan for your finances, not just for the present, but even for the future. Then practical self-care is also about, for example, taking professional development classes, yeah? Organizing your closet, especially for us women, we've got so many clothes, and sometimes you wake up late in the morning and you can't find that top which goes with this particular dress or that pair of shoes. If you organize your closet, then you save yourself the anxiety, the rush of trying to figure out how to dress in the morning. So it's about all these things that you're writing here, organizing paperwork. If I come to your office and look at your desk, it's easy to tell who is able to find something in the shortest period of time, because some of us have mountains of papers on our desks in the in tray and hardly anything in the out tray. So you need to understand, how do I organize my paperwork? How do I keep my space clean and organized? Then we have what we call spiritual self-care. We need to understand that spirituality does not always talk about a religion. You can be a very spiritual person and yet you are not a religious. Spirituality is about being in touch with yourself, understanding who am I? What is my purpose in life? What is it about Victoria and what is she doing in life? So if you understand who you are and what your purpose is in life, then you have a spiritual self-care. You could do this by going to church or by going to the mosque. You could also do it through meditation, through yoga, going to nature. You could also dedicate time for self-reflection. All these things could help you connect with your spiritual side. So it's important to understand that these are just activities which nurture your spirit and allow you to think bigger than yourself. So it does not necessarily have to be religious, but for most of us, we take care of ourselves spiritually by going to church or by going to the mosque or by getting in touch with a higher being. The importance of social capital cannot be underscored. How many of us, or how many of you listening to me right now, have got three good friends who, if they called right now and told them that they have an emergency, would come running or would figure out how to support them? Social self-care is very important, especially in these days where everything is done online. We hardly have time to meet physically with our friends. You even have dates online. You can do a cup of coffee online. So it is very important that you nurture and deepen relationships with people in your life. This could be your spouse, it could be your friends, it could be your family, your mom, your dad. We all remember, if you got along with the news of the lady in Roiro who was just found dead, had been dead for 9 months, about 82 years old, and the sons kept on sending money to her. So you want to ask yourself, what was her social life like? You know, the neighbors, the people around, people in the community. So it is very important. You don't want to end up alone. But remember, you must initiate those relationships. Don't be the person in church or in other social circles who always stands aside and waits for people to come and say hello to you. Be the person who reaches out and tries to establish relationships, connections, because you never know at what point in life you may need those connections. So it's important to take time out with your friends, with your children, even. For those of us who are parenting, this is very important because if you do not find time to bond with your children when they are young, by the time they hit preteen, there's there's very little that you can do in terms of connecting with them. So you realize you have this teenager in your house and you hardly know them. And when you try to bond with them, it is just not possible because you don't even know each other. And they may ask you, for all that period of time, where have you been? Why are you in my life right now? So remember, create time for people who are important to you, your husbands, your wives, your children, your parents. It's very, very important to schedule that time and be very intentional about it. We've also said establish healthy boundaries. If you have scheduled time for yourself and family and something comes up that is work related or that is related to something else, it's important to be able to create that boundary. Of course, with an emergency at work, then work needs to get done. But also remember, if it is something to do with the family, then you also need to create that time. Intellectual self-care, any activity that stimulates your mind or your intellect. And this could be things like reading a book for those of us who enjoy reading books, going to the museum, playing chess. That is intellectual self-care. Learning a new skill. Or even if you're someone who has done your degree, your master's, your PhD, can you learn something else, a professional course? So add to your intellect because human beings are always learning. So intellectual self-care is also very important. It will help you maintain good mental health. So it is important then for you to make your own self-care plan because self-care, like we have mentioned, is very, very personal. If I go to the gym, it may work for me. For you, what may work for you is taking a walk in Karura. For you, what may work for you is scaling Mount Kenya. So what is self-care? It is very, very personal. Do what feels right for you. Then self-care can look different at different stages of your life. So what works for you at some point in your life may not work for you later on in life. And remember, sometimes you may not have too much time, but you do create that into you are intentional. So you may decide, I may not be able to run a marathon, but I can always run maybe a kilometer around my neighborhood. And then at some point, I will be able to run that marathon. Simply matters to do with self-care. So number one, it is important to look at these additional self-care tips. And we are saying recognize there's a limit to what you can do. So if you do more than what you need to, then you risk your ability to serve your family, your organization, and most of all, yourself. This is where we talk about creating boundaries and being able to recognize that there's a limit to what you can do as a worker, as a CEO, as a director. At whatever you do at work, realize that there's a limit. So if you get to a place where you're burnt out, then your ability to serve goes down or it becomes diminished. Then I'm saying try not to take your work home, right? Leave time for transition between work and home. And we say leave work at work, possibly, right? We've said that people who will even go for their leave with their laptops and still work even when they're on leave. So if it is possible, and as much as it is possible, try not to take your work home, especially for those who may have, little children or families and you need to bond with them. Or even if you're single and you need to touch base with your friends for that social self-care, try not to take your work at home. Then explore and practice. Explore and practice stress management techniques. Get regular exercise and do fun activities that take you completely away from your work and life stress. If you're very stressed, then we say that there are various ways of managing the stressors. So sometimes you could, for example, we said there are 4 A's of stress management. Number 1, you could avoid whatever it is that's stressing you. And when you talk about avoiding, you could have this colleague at the workplace who has negative energy. Sometimes we do have those kind of colleagues who always come to your desk and they want to talk about the CEO, they want to talk about the HR person or about that girl in a negative way. So you end up feeling so drained and you wonder, how do I tell them not to talk about other people? Because it gives you negative energy and you start seeing people in a different way. Now, how do you avoid that kind of stress? It's by telling this person it's by avoiding this person, if you have to be with them in a certain place, then you try and avoid their company because they give you negative energy. Alternatively, you could alter the situation, which is the second way of managing stress. Altering means that you could tell them, by the way, Victoria, I would really rather we talk about work-related issues, because when you talk about so and so, it gives me negative energy and negativity towards them, and it makes me feel strained around the working relationship. So the next time they want to come and give you negative talks about other people, they will remember, by the Victoria said she does not like talking about. So they will not come to your desk. They will take a detour and go to someone else's desk. So you can avoid the stress. You can alter the stress or the stressor rather. You could also adapt, right? So if something is stressing you, then you may tell yourself, this is how it is. I am going to adapt to the stressor. So you change yourself, right? You change yourself to adapt to the circumstances. So you could avoid, you could alter, you could adapt. And then number 4, you could accept that this is the way things are. When COVID happened, we had to accept that when someone dies, I may not be able to go for a funeral. I may not be able to just step out of my house and go to the supermarket. I may have to work from home. So we accepted. So 4 A's of managing stress, and it's important for you to explore and practice others, right? So look for other stress management techniques to help you manage the stressors around your environment so that you're able to do your regular exercise, your regular regimen of self-care. Then remind yourself that you cannot pour out of an empty cup. Some of us are always giving, especially if you're in a managerial role or supervisory role, you're always there for everyone else. You're always taking care of everybody else until someone will ask you, so who takes care of you? If you do not make time for your wellness, then you will be forced to make time for your illness. And this is where you ground to a halt. You get so much burnout. Maybe you get into a state of depression, and then there you are admitted simply because you did not create time for yourself and you're pouring until you became depleted. So remind yourself, you cannot pour out of an empty cup. And then it's important to share perspective. Get support from other peers. Spend time with people outside your profession so that your work life does not inhabit your whole life. So if you're in insurance, could you spend time around people who are medics, people who are in the creative industries, so that you have a more holistic outlook towards life, such that even when you're dealing with people, you're able to also see from their worldview and not just seen from the lens of someone who works in the insurance industry. So get support also from your peers and also share their perspectives. That is very important. So in a nutshell, build your own self-care toolbox. Ask yourself, what can you do in 5 minutes or less that can support you in practicing self-care? And remember, we are saying that what is self-care for me may be very different for my colleagues. So sustainable self-care begins with you. You must be very intentional. We said it is called self-care because you're the one who initiates it, you're the one who takes care of it, you're the one who progresses it, and it cannot be done by anyone else other than you. So you must be very intentional about self-care. So be kind to yourself. There are those days where you feel maybe you're not able to go to the gym. Do not get overly harsh on yourself, but tell yourself that I can try again tomorrow. So if you fail and stumble at initiating, then be kind to yourself and tell yourself that you can still try another day. Enhance your awareness with education and experiences. There are very many things that we can do in terms of practical, intellectual, emotional self-care, other than the ones that we have given there. So try and enlarge your boundaries by, reading around the topic of self-care, so that you're able to gain more education and gather more experiences in terms of how you can actually carry out self-care. So accept where you are on your path at all times. And this is very important when it comes to self-care. Because when you look at your colleagues, sometimes you look at your peers and you're thinking they got a master's before you did, they got promoted before you did. And if you look at that, you can get into a place where you have a pity party. So you have a lot of self-pity and you look at yourself, why am I not at the same level as my peers? Remember, we all have our own individual journeys, and what is happening in their life may not necessarily happen in yours, and what is happening in yours may not necessarily happen in theirs. So for you to even get to a place where you're doing self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, purpose of your life, being in touch with who you are, then you need to accept where you are on your path at all times. It may not be where you want to be or where you should be, but acceptance helps you be able to have vision, and you're able to plan and be intentional about how you want to progress. And that way you're taking care of yourself, even when it comes to your mental health. Exchange information and feelings with people who can validate you. Validation is very important from other people, but first of all, you need to validate yourself, because only when you validate yourself are you able to understand or receive validation from others. Do not peg your life or your circumstances on how people validate you, but more importantly, validate yourself. And then you're able to exchange information and feelings then with other people out there who can validate you. Clarify your personal boundaries. What works for you? What does not? You may be working in that company, you're in a department where you feel that you're not achieving your full potential. So even as you're struggling to do self-care, it keeps dragging you down. It keeps dragging you down. So maybe you're a very good marketer, but you're in finance. Can you clarify what works for you or what does not work for you? Are you able to negotiate with management to transfer you to a department where you feel you can achieve more potential or your potential? Then that way you'll be taking care of yourself by clarifying your personal boundaries. Express your needs verbally. This is very key when it comes to expressing how you feel or what you need. We've sometimes dealt with couples who are living in the same house and will be sending each other texts when they're stayed right next to each other. So it is important for you to express your needs verbally, respectfully, if it is your supervisor or your colleagues. Because if you're asking, for example, for a change in your department because where you are, your mental health is suffering, then you need to express your needs verbally and respectfully. Then take positive action to change your environment. When we talk about wellness, we talk about environmental wellness. How many of us made our bed this morning? What kind of a place are you seated at right now? How clean is your environment? How well aerated is your room? Are you close to a water dispenser? Do you have access to a good washroom? What kind of an environment are you operating from? That is very important because your environment has a direct impact or effect on your mental health. Then create a network of support. We already talked about the importance of social capital, social connectivity. That is also very important. Then finally, we are saying build your self-care toolbox and use it every day. Remembering that self-care is different for everyone. So what works for one person may not work for you. And with that, I would like to hand it back to Mary, and then we can go through the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daktari. That indeed was a good session, very informative. It's always important to be reminded that, as you've said, self-care is not selfish. We need to take care of ourselves. Mary is on it. So yes, I'm saying that was a very important session, and we are really grateful for the session. And at this point, I'd like
Mary or Gideon?
Can the rest hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you,
Yes, we
Mary.
can.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
All
we
right.
can.
Okay, Daktari
can
can
hear
hear
you.
me. Okay, thank you all. All right,
Stella, Mary,
so
or Gideon?
okay, Gideon, just let her know I can hear her, and you guys can hear me. Okay, so as that is handled, we'd like to think we'll be free. We'll be happy to respond to that.
We lost you, Mary, at some point, but I think guys can ask questions. You can either raise your hand or type on the chat.
I can see Gerald Cheruiyot, he's unmuted. You'd like to ask a question? All right, so thank you, Victoria.
Just a quick one, Mary. I think
Okay.
the biggest thing with mental health is how do you self-diagnose yourself to know that you have a problem? Or do you need somebody to tell you that you have a problem? Because you might be probably in a problem, but you don't know whether you have that problem. So how do you get to identify if you have a problem or you are lying in any one of those categories?
All right, thank you very much. Daktari will respond to that. Any other question?
Hello. Maybe to ask,
Hello, Jackson.
how much are your charges for personal programs for therapy sessions?
All right, we will ask Daktari to respond to that. Thank you for that. Any other question? Okay, we don't have another question. Daktari, if you can hear me, you can respond to those two questions. Your cost, and somebody, Yuna Thinwa, is asking that we share the recording. Yes, we will share both the presentation and the recording for this. And we appreciate all the messages coming through the chat, just appreciating how helpful the sessions have been. So thank you for that. We appreciate that, and we appreciate even your patronage, and thanks you for logging in. I'm sure it's going to be helpful. So as we wait for Daktari just to respond to that, some very important things here, that it is important for you to recognize your limits. Sometimes it's very tempting, as we've been told, especially if you're in a managerial position, to keep pouring. and you cannot pour forever from an empty cup. And also we need to try and make sure we have our limits. We should not take work home as much as possible. Sometimes that is easier said than done. And we also need to explore on stress management. And also remember, if we don't keep time to take care of ourselves, then we will be able to have time to take care of the illness. And then let's not forget to meet together like we're doing, learn, network, and that's very important. So just a minute, Elizabeth will take up the questions as I try to reach on Daktari.
Thank you, Mary. I've joined again. I can hear you now.
Please go ahead. There are two questions for you.
Well, I can see, Victoria, how to self-diagnose. Would this be to self-diagnose the mental illness?
Yes, there was a question on that level. How do you know whether you're suffering from any mental illness? And then the second question is, how much are your risks? As Chiromo, yes.
Okay, thank you. So number one, we usually say it's do not self-diagnose, right? You may see some of the symptoms that we've mentioned. For example, the depression, which is very common. You may find yourself crying a lot. You may have low moments. You may feel like you have no appetite. Your sleep patterns change. But unless you go to a professional, we say do not self-diagnose. However, there's what we call the 4 Ds of abnormal psychology, D for dog. And we say number one, if you find yourself becoming very dysfunctional at the workplace, you come to the workplace and you have no desire to work, then you could possibly be having a mental illness. You have no motivation, or you come to the work and you're not able to do it, then we say that could be a sign. Now, dysfunctionality is not enough. We also say another D, that the symptom that you're experiencing could be a danger to yourself or to the people around you. We did talk about schizophrenia. With schizophrenia, you hear voices and you see images or you see things which other people are not seeing. And with that, the voices ordinarily tell you very negative things, like go and jump off a cliff, go and take that knife and injure somebody. So, of course, then those symptoms are a danger to yourself or to the people around you. So if you see someone having those symptoms, then we could possibly diagnose. But remember, there has to be more criteria than just that, right? So we have dysfunctionality, we have symptoms are a danger. Symptoms could also be if you're seeing things or images which other people are not seeing, then of course that could cause you a lot of distress. And then number 4, we say it could be deviance. Deviance meaning that it is not common. There's a change in behavior. For example, the symptoms that you're displaying are not within that particular cultural setting. If you see a pregnant woman eating the stones that they will eat, then we say it is fitting because she is having maybe a depletion of some nutrients, so she's eating that particular stone for that. But if you see a normal man eating those stones, then you'd want to question what exactly is going on here. So that is a deviance from the norm. So if you meet these 4, deviance, distress, dysfunction, and danger, then we could possibly diagnose you with a mental illness. But we say do not self-diagnose, always refer the symptoms to a professional. I've seen a question on bipolar disorder. Bipolar is where you experience mood shifts. You may be very happy when you wake up, and then at some point you find yourself going very low. At some point when you're very happy, you may become very impulsive. You may want to spend a lot of money. You may have very risky behavior, like very risky sexual behavior. But when you go low, you want to sleep in bed, you don't want to get out of your environment, you then feel suicidal. So with bipolar depression, it's a type of depression that is also manageable with medication and also with therapy. You could get bipolar depression because of the genetical component, but it is treatable. So you can get therapy for that. You can also get medication. So it's simply mood shifts on extremes You may become very hyper, very manic, and sometimes you may become very aggressive, very impulsive. You may spend a lot of money. You may do things which ordinarily you would not do, and would say that you're suffering from a manic episode. And sometimes, if not all times, it's usually an emergency, and you may need admission. On the flip side, you may become very low, very depressed, and you may also start considering things like suicide. And in both instances, admission and then medication would really, really help. Mary, is there clarification?
No, just someone who needs to mute. Just continue, Dr.
Yeah, so I think I'm done on that on bipolar depression. Was there another question?
Yeah, somebody has asked, you talk about anxiety, how to handle anxiety.
Okay. So anxiety, most of us, like we said, do have a level of anxiety, and it is that feeling of a bit of fear, a bit of paranoia, and you're not sure where it's coming from. Sometimes
We can't hear you, Dr.
am I audible now?
Yes, now you're audible.
Sorry, I don't know why it is keeping me out, but sorry about that. So I was saying that anxiety is that you have a bit of paranoia, you have a bit of fear about something, but you can't really explain it. So sometimes you may be told you need to go and do a presentation, or you need to go and stand in front of people, and you start sweating, you start having gastrointestinal issues. Sometimes you may have palpitation. So how do you handle anxiety? Number one is about learning relaxation techniques. You may also do things like breathing techniques. How do I breathe, right? Sometimes when you have anxiety issues or anxiety disorders, then it's important for you to learn correct exercise in terms of mindfulness. Mindfulness is being alive in the moment. And when you're having, for example, an anxiety attack, it's important to think about the five senses. What can I touch? What can I smell? What can I feel? So using the five senses helps you to ground yourself in that moment of anxiety. Then also ask yourself, where is that anxiety coming from? So I need to learn assertiveness skills. I need to build my self-esteem. I need to also have cognitive therapy, because cognitive therapy is about what is going on in my mind. Why am I having anxiety? Is because of what I have thought. I have thought about something, there's my belief about it. And of course, when I think negatively, then I will have negative feelings, which is anxiety, and then probably negative behavior. So I need to learn a lot of those things about mindfulness, relaxation techniques, breathing techniques, and also sometimes some foods could also cause you a lot of anxiety. So dietary adjustments. Then if the anxiety is causing you to become dysfunctional, it's important to see a therapist, then you can discuss where it is coming from. And then you could also probably get a bit of medication to help you with it, but not necessarily always on medication. You could simply probably do therapy and discuss where the anxiety is coming from, so that you're able to manage the triggers for the anxiety. So identify and then learn to manage the triggers. You can identify on your own, or you could also do this with a therapist. Then that would help you manage the anxiety. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Victoria. There's another question on how does one deal with phobias? And that's second question, how can one handle people who kill your self-esteem? Victoria?
Thank you. So thank you, Mary. So phobias fall under anxiety. And the same way that you're coping with general anxiety, the same way you handle phobia. For example, you may have a phobia for lifts. Some of us feel like you cannot get into the lift because it's how you feel. Or you may have a phobia for passing by Kenyatta National Hospital because that is where you lost your parent or you lost someone who is close to you. So you have a phobia for the hospital. Sometimes you can have
We can't hear you, Dr.
Really sorry, Mary. I'm not sure what happened to my network, but let's proceed. So I was saying that sometimes you can face the phobia head on. For example, if you live around Kenyatta, if you don't want to pass the Kenyatta National Hospital because you know someone close to you, then sometimes you could face it head on by making sure that that is where you pass by, you know, every day just to be able to get over that phobia. If it is a phobia for the lift, then you can just tell yourself, I'm going to get into this lift, or go with someone, a friend who is able to be in the lift, and then they can go up and down the lift with you, and you're able to face that. And now that we call that bit intense, because that is, you know, we call it, there's a name that we call it, that you are able to confront your fears like immediately. But if you're not able to do that, then we say that it's important for you to get into things like physical exercises. Physical activity will help you be able to deal with phobia, because again, we are saying that phobia is just a type of anxiety. Then if you practice things like yoga or relaxation in terms of self-care, then that will also help you deal with your phobias. And also things like progressive muscle relaxation, which is a technique that we can teach at some point when doing therapy with a therapist. So if you're able to do that, facing your fears, and also looking at the evidence of this phobia, is it really something that can happen, or is it just in your mind? Because phobias usually are because of something that has happened or something that you've had, so they may not necessarily be your reality. So confront that evidence and try to see that if really it is something that warrants your fears, but then still work through it by the method that I've defined when talking about how to handle general anxiety. Thank you, Mary. How
All right.
can one
There's some
Mhm.
the
how can
self-esteem,
one
yes.
handle people who kill your self-esteem, please? So self-esteem is about how you perceive yourself. Now, remember I did mention in the slides that you need to first of all validate yourself before you look for validation from other people. People who kill your self-esteem, it could be your boss. So you need to stand up to them by being very assertive. Now, this has to be about you. You have to work on yourself to stand up to people who are killing your self-esteem. How are they killing your self-esteem? Is it by telling you you're not a good worker, you don't do well, you don't dress well, you don't look nice? Can you first of all validate yourself by telling yourself that yes, you're a good worker, yes, you dress well, yes, you do well when you do your projects, yes, you're a good presenter? First of all, validate yourself. The negativity from other people will not necessarily get to you. Of course, it takes time. It takes time for you to learn how to speak to yourself positively, especially if the people killing your self-esteem are doing so every day or every other day. So you need to learn how to talk to yourself positively, because then that becomes your voice. It becomes your inner validation. So learn how to validate yourself by giving yourself positive self-talk and telling yourself the telling yourself the opposite of what the people who are trying to kill your self-esteem are telling you. So turn their negativity into your positivity. Tell yourself positive things. And also remember the stress management, the 4 A's of stress management that we've mentioned. If you're able to avoid them, if you're able to alter the circumstances, or if you adapt, or then if you accept, but accepting does not mean that you cannot do something about it. You can accept and still do something about it. So more about validating yourself than seeking external validation. Then you're able to stand up to people who really try to work at lowering your self-esteem. Thank you, Mary. Really sorry about this network.
It's okay. There's a question here. How does a corporate help its staff to self-care? I don't know if you had handled that.
How does that? I can't see the question. How does that what?
A corporate help its staff to self-care. Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we have what we call employee assistance programs, right? Now, most corporate, if I got the question right, will have that employee assistance program, which are programs that help employees manage things they're going or that are happening in their lives, which are making them dysfunctional at work. So, for example, if you're having burnout, if you're having relationship problems at home, and of course, then that will cause you to have dysfunctionality at work. And if you're dysfunction at the workplace, then it means that your productivity goes down, and also the return on investment on the company also goes down. So if you do have an EAP, employee assistance program, then that is a win-win for both the company and the employees. So when it comes to the company helping people to do self-care, therapy is one of them. If you're experiencing things which are making you dysfunctional, go for therapy. talk with a therapist, what is the anxiety, what are the triggers, and how to manage, then that is also part of self-care. If you feel stuck in your career, then you can see a career coach, and all these things fall under the employee assistance program. Mary, I'm not sure if you do have an employee assistance program within IIK. Mary?
Yes, please, Victoria.
I was asking if you do have an EAP, employee assistance program, because that is how the corporates then will help employees take care of their self-care.
Okay, we don't have that, unfortunately, at IIK.
All right. Any other question, clarification?
Someone had asked about bipolar.
Yes, I think we went through bipolar. We said it is where you have moods on two extremes.
All right, I think that's about it, Victoria. Allow me to just appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm seeing there is a question that's just come in. Allow me to read it. How can you advise an individual who is interested in becoming a mental wellness person, like a champion, stroke ambassador, even voluntarily in programs or something, if they are passionate about it, but don't know how to start or go about it? If you can answer that, I think then you can give us your part in short, and then we can conclude.
Thank you, Mary. I think that one I can have a personal conversation with them if they'll be agreeable to that. Because when you want to become a mental wellness champion and you're passionate about it, then that is very easy, because all you need is first of all understand what mental health issues are all about. We also have what we call self-screening tools, which we can share and you can share within the company. And then you can do maybe a very brief psychological first aid kind of a training to help you manage people who have mental health issues. And not people who have mental health issues, because we all do, but people who are experiencing poor mental health. So my part in short, one, I'm very sorry about the internet on my end. It's a bit of a problem, but I'm sorry about that. And then one thing I want us to really look at is that if you don't make time for your wellness, then you will be forced to make time for your illness. So you must take care of yourself, and self-care is not selfish. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You must first of all take care of yourself before you take care of others. So thanks, Mary, for the opportunity. I hope to be hooking up with you in another setting. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Victoria. That indeed was time well spent. Those were wonderful lessons and great reminders. For me, my take home from here is that self-care is personal. It's about me. It's up to me. If I don't, nobody else will do it for me. And I need to think about my toolkit. So that's what I've taken from the session. So thank you so much. At this point, I'd like to invite our Hornsec, Mr. George Ogutu, to come in. He will give us the IIK's part in short, pray for us, and then we'll conclude. Thank you very much, everyone. It has been a pleasure. Karibu, George.
Thank you, Mary, and good morning to everyone. And thank you, Victoria. I think that has been a very insightful piece. I believe those who are listening have actually picked quite a bit of lessons today that they're going to put to practice. My take home is that your health really is a function of how you manage the stressors. And I think Victoria has been very elaborating what the stresses are, and she's told us exactly how to manage them to enable us to have a well health, so to speak. So thank you, everybody. Before I close with the word of prayer, I'd just like to also thank our director, Madam Alice, who was able to give us the opening remarks. And for Mary, thank you for coming in handy to just moderate the session. I think we want to also gratefully acknowledge the support that the Chiromo Hospital Group is giving the insurance industry generally in terms of wellness and work-life balance. Today, I think I've had to attend quite a bit of sessions that are being conducted by that group. And we can only thank them and believe that we continue to work together, we continue to interact and to engage for the welfare and benefit of the citizens of this country. So without much ado, let me invite us to bow and close our eyes as we say the words of God. Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for the teaching that we've had. We praise you for everything that we've been able to listen to. We pray for the speaker. We pray for the attendants, and we ask that wherever they have come from, whatever they're doing, may you guide and protect them. May you give them the wisdom to put to practice what they've learned today, and may you be able to provide for them also spiritually, physically, and mentally. Because we pray this, trusting and believing in Jesus' name. Amen.